Hello, and welcome to Bible Questions TV, the show that tries to answer the really difficult questions about the Bible. If you have any questions of your own, you can go to our website, biblequestions.tv, and submit a question. We'll answer every question that comes in, and we'll even use some of them as topics for future episodes of Bible Questions TV. In this episode, we're going to play a clip from an excellent film called Zeitgeist Refuted, Final Cut, by Elliot Nash, who is a good friend and a fan of this show. His film is a point-by-point refutation of the extremely popular internet film called Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist promoted a theory called mythicism, which claims the story of Jesus in the Bible never really happened, and that it was just a retelling of many other more ancient stories. The video said things like, the ancient Egyptian god Horace was crucified and rose again on the third day, and many other similar claims. The only problem was that none of the claims of Zeitgeist were actually true, and because fact-checking claims about ancient texts is difficult, many people simply believed what Zeitgeist said. Thankfully, Elliot Nash in his refutation of the film does that fact-checking for us, and he clearly shows that the makers of Zeitgeist are at best not very good researchers, and at worst, intentionally trying to deceive people. Today, we are going to watch the first 25 minutes of his 2-hour film. If you would like to watch the whole film for free, you can go to our website, biblequestions.tv. Let's take a look.
They bring up Horace. This is a far too simplistic representation of the myths surrounding Horace. In reality, there are many versions. There were originally several different gods known by the name Horace. It seems Zeitgeist is trying to make a parallel between Set or Seth and Satan. Besides both of these figures being evil and starting with the letter S in English, there is no parallel. The birth on December 25th can be immediately dismissed as irrelevant because nowhere in the Bible do we find any reference to the birth of Jesus being on December 25th. Nor do we find the birth of Horace on December 25th, but in the month of Koyak, or July 15th. Obviously, Jesus was not born in December, or any time in the winter for that matter, because we read in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 7 and 8, that there were shepherds watching over their flocks at night. Jesus was most likely born in late spring or early autumn, as most scholars would agree. This date of December 25th was chosen about 300 years after the origins of Christianity in AD 354 by Roman Bishop Liberius of the Roman Catholic Church, based upon pagan thought and coinciding with the pagan sun god worship observance of the winter solstice and the Roman traditions of Saturnalia, rather than on biblical truth. This is why many Christians do not celebrate Christmas, because it is irrelevant to the Bible and rooted in pagan practice. Regarding Isis being known as Isis Mary, there is no scholarly information to substantiate this claim. There is also no evidence that Isis was a virgin in the myth. Translated from the Hymn of Osiris, the myth distinctly says Isis drew from him his essence. Various Egyptian scholars state very clearly that Isis was not a virgin when she gave birth to Horace, as Mary was when she gave birth to Jesus. For example, Richard Wilkinson, author of Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt, states, through her magic, Isis became pregnant by him, eventually giving birth to their child, Horace. As for the star in the east claim, there is no such myth in the story of Horace. There is no evidence in Egyptian astrotheology that they assigned the alignment of Sirius, the star in the east, to signify the birth of Horace. Neither is there any mention of any kings of any number. Even if Zeitgeist was right about this claim, it is irrelevant, because the Bible does not number the men that came to Jesus' birth, nor were they kings, they were magi, or wise men. Horace becoming a teacher at age 12 is nowhere to be found in the accounts of Horace. There is a form known as Horace the Child, but he wasn't a prodigal teacher. He was kept hidden away in the papyrus marshes by his mother until he was ready to be ruler of Egypt. In addition, no bibliographic material suggests Horace had a ministry, much less at the age of 30, nor was he baptized by Anup. The character Anup, which is also known as Anubis or Anpu, means royal child and is usually depicted as a jackal-headed or wild dog-headed man. Anubis was the lord of embalming, and through this is connected with incense and perfumery, but not baptism. Neither are there any statements to the effect that Horace had 12 disciples. Mention of Horace's followers are in the translation of the Liturgy of Funeral Offerings, the fourth ceremony. Actually, Horace had 4 followers called Hiru Shemsu. There is another reference to a group of 16 followers of Horace known as Mesnui, or blacksmiths. While 16 minus 4 is 12, this cannot be the intention of Zeitgeist. The total number of followers here is 20, not 12. In regard to performing miracles, there was some magic associated with Horace, but this is with Horace the child, not with Horace the elder or his adult forms. Horace on the crocodiles was a common manifestation of the importance of Horace in healing ritual. The power of this healing seems to come from his mother, Isis, who is indeed the goddess of immense magical power. It is not unusual, though, to find reference to miracles in reading any ancient or modern-day literature. Nevertheless, we do not find one miracle that Jesus did in the Horace story. Horace did not walk on water, as the narrator claimed, but was thrown into the water. There is also no evidence for these names of Horace in the mythical accounts. He was known as other titles, however. Horace the child was known by magical titles such as Horace on the crocodiles. Horace, as son of Isis and Osiris, was known as pillar of his mother, savior of his father, and Horace as a sun god was also known as lord of the sky, god of the east, Horace of the horizon, and later associated with Ra. In the 4th dynasty, the king, the living god, may have been one of the greatest gods as well. But by the 5th dynasty, the supremacy of the cult of Ra, the sun god, was accepted even by the kings. The Horace king was now also son of Ra, not the son of God. None of the titles for Horace listed in Zeitgeist are recognized by any Egyptologist. Horace was not crucified, buried for 3 days, or resurrected for that matter. In some versions, Horace had one or both of his eyes injured, but he was not killed, and it was his father Osiris who was killed, dismembered, reconstituted, and revived by Isis, his magical mother. Furthermore, death by crucifixion was not invented until long after the origins of the myths of Horace. From the earliest times, the god was depicted as a bird or falcon whose eyes are the sun and the moon, and whose breath is the cooling north wind manifested in different birds and species. Does this look like Jesus? Again, there is no primary Egyptian records prior to the New Testament to support the resemblances of Jesus and Horace. Next is Attis. Concerning the virgin birth claim, the Olympian gods, or Zeus, cut off the male organ and cast it away. There grew up from it an almond tree, and when its fruit was ripe, Nana picked an almond and laid it in her bosom. The almond disappeared, and she became pregnant. Nana abandoned the baby Attis. This is hardly a parallel to the biblical claim, but a desperate exaggeration. Again, December 25th is irrelevant. After Attis was tended by a he-goat, Attis fell in love and was not crucified, but castrated himself under a pine tree, which in no sense can be seen as death by crucifixion on a tree or a cross. Then Cybele restored Attis to life. Many critics refer to this as the resurrection of Attis, though there is no mention of a tomb or a 3-day period. Additionally, apologetics author Charlie Campbell states, the alleged resurrection of Attis isn't even mentioned until after 150 AD, long after the time of Jesus. Furthermore, Dr. Walter Burkert, a Greek religion scholar and author, stated, there is no evidence for a resurrected Attis. Even Osiris remains with the dead. As the Princeton theologian J. Gresham Machen points out, the myth contains no account of a resurrection. All that Cybele, the great mother goddess, is able to obtain is that the body of Attis should be preserved, that his hair should continue to grow, and that his little finger should move. Dr. Ronald Nash adds, it was only during the later Roman celebration, after AD 300, of the spring festival that anything remotely connected with a resurrection appears. Concerning Krishna, in Joseph Campbell's book Occidental Mythology, page 342, he stated, Krishna, whose terrible uncle Kansa was the tyrant king, the Savior's mother Devaki was of royal lineage, the tyrant's niece, and at the time when she was married the wicked monarch heard a voice mysteriously, which let him know that her 8th child would be his slayer. He therefore confined both her and her husband in a closely guarded prison where he murdered their first 6 infants as they came. According to this story, the mother Devaki had 7 children before Krishna was born. This would not make Devaki a virgin. Distinguished Professor of Hinduism in India, Vasudha Narayana, PhD, University of Bombay, said, "I've never heard of Krishna being born of a virgin, either through Sanskrit or vernacular texts, or even folklore. And born on December 25th, wow. The text says explicitly he was born on the 8th day of the waning moon in the month that now comes between approximately August 15th and September 14th. I can't imagine why people would sit back and cook up all these conspiracies." The only mention of stars in Krishna's birth within Hindu literature is in the Bhagavata Purana, chapter 10, 3, 1-5. "Then there was the supreme hour, all auspicious and most suitable, with the constellation of Rahini rising, and all the stars and planets in a favorable position. Everywhere was peace. The multitude of stars twinkled in the sky, and cities, towns, pasturing grounds, and mines were at their best. The minds of the saintly, oppressed as they had been by the Asura, Kamsa and his men, turned perfectly contented when in that situation the kettle drums together resounded with the unborn one to be born. Twinkling stars in the sky are far from the biblical account of a star in the east signaling Jesus' birth. In the film Zeitgeist, author Edward Carpenter is cited for providing this information on Krishna's supposed miracles and resurrection. Carpenter, in his book Pagan and Christian Creeds, stated, "To go into the parallelism of the careers of Krishna, the Indian sun god, and Jesus would take too long, because indeed the correspondence is so extraordinarily elaborate." He then cites Robertson's Christianity and Mythology as a reference. Then Robertson transcribes the outline of the well-known Krishna saga as follows. "The son of Devaki, the two brothers grew up in the midst of the shepherds, slaying monsters. Arrived at adolescence, the two brothers put to death Kamsa, and Krishna became king. He continued to clear the land of monsters. After having been present at the death of his brother, he himself perished, wounded in the heel by the arrow of a hunter." Thus we read in the well-known Krishna saga that there is no virgin birth, no star, and no miracles. The comparisons are not so extraordinarily elaborate after all. Robertson also stated, "The case in favor of the assumption of Christian priority has been in a general way strengthened by the precise investigation of Hindu literature, which has gone to show that much of it, as it stands, is of far later redaction than had once been supposed." Thus, Zeitgeist cites Carpenter, and Carpenter cites Robertson, who admits that Hindu literature is of much later publication than previously assumed, and therefore any similarities between Christianity and Hinduism were borrowed by the Hindus and not vice versa. In the long Indian epic poem, the Mahabharata, Book 16, there is an account of the death of Krishna. It reads, "Having restrained all his senses, speech, and mind, Krishna laid himself down in high yoga. A fierce hunter of the name of Jara then came there, desirous of a deer. The hunter, mistaking Krishna for a deer, pierced him at the heel with a shaft and quickly came to the spot for capturing his prey. Coming up, Jara beheld a man dressed in yellow robes, wrapped in yoga, and endued with many arms. Regarding himself an offender, and filled with fear, he touched the feet of Krishna. The high-souled one comforted him, and then ascended upwards, filling the entire welkin with splendor. Krishna died and ascended, but there is still no resurrection, as claims Zeitgeist. It's hard to imagine how this blue Indian man could be mistaken for Jesus, or a deer for that matter. The only similarity we have here is an ascension, which is not even mentioned in Zeitgeist. Even if you do want to take Zeitgeist's premise that the ascension account might have been borrowed, then who borrowed from who? The earliest testimony for the complete text of the Mahabharata dates to the 1st century AD by the Greek sophist Dion Chrysostom. The available accounts of Dionysus' birth indicate that Dionysus was not born of a virgin. In the best-known myth, Dionysus was born through an affair between Zeus and a princess. In another version, Zeus mated with his daughter Persephone, and she bore Dionysus. Dr. Edwin Yamauchi, professor of history at Miami University, confirms, there is no evidence of a virgin birth for Dionysus. As the story goes, Zeus, disguised as a human, fell in love with the princess Semele, the daughter of Cadmus, and she became pregnant. Also, not only is December 25th irrelevant to Jesus' birth, there is also no reference to Dionysus being born on December 25th in any scholarly literature. Even some of Zeitgeist sources, Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, note that Dionysus' birth was celebrated on January 6th by some in Alexandria, which makes it of no relevance for copycat claims. Indeed, Dionysus was a traveling teacher. At any rate, this is a vague similarity that could be found in most ancient and modern literature concerning any figure with a message to share with others. But there are differences as well. Dionysus wandered the world accompanied with wild women, flushed with wine, shoulders draped with a fawn skin, whereas Jesus traveled the limited area surrounding Jerusalem, providing moral teachings. Though there are accounts of Dionysus filling empty vessels with wine, there is no reference to Dionysus turning water into wine, as Zeitgeist claimed. And it is not surprising that Dionysus performed miracles involving wine, since he was the god of wine. One historical study explains, the ancient literature says that there was a spring with clear, sparkling, wine-colored water, very pleasant-tasting water in which the newly born Dionysus was bathed. Also, a spring in the temple flowed with wine. At Elis, the priests of Dionysus placed 3 large empty cauldrons in a sealed room to find them filled with wine when they returned the next day. However, from these references it is obvious that there are significant differences between the Dionysus legend and the story in John 2. The spring flowed with water, and the one at Andros flowed with wine, not wine that had once been water. And the empty cauldrons in the Elis temple were filled with wine rather than water subsequently changed into wine. Key elements in John's story. These differences have convinced most scholars that John or his tradition is not dependent on the Dionysus legend for this story. Research professor Dr. Donald A. Carson wrote, older attempts to interpret this sign as a Christianized version of the Dionysus myth or of related stories have largely been abandoned in the light of evidence that the alleged parallels are wholly inadequate. Zeitgeist source for these titles of Dionysus, Acharya S., only says he was considered the only begotten son, Alpha and Omega, etc., not that he actually was known by these titles. She has absolutely no source for the title King of Kings, which is a generic term in the first place, and secondly does not even suit Dionysus, since Zeus was the head god according to mythology. Nor does the title Only Begotten Son suit Dionysus, since Zeus had several offspring including Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Persephone, Dionysus, Perseus, Heracles, Helen, Minos, and Muses. James Frazer, author of The Golden Bough, is cited in Zeitgeist for this claim of the resurrection. With such an array of options, it may be no surprise that at least one variation bears a superficial resemblance to what happened to Jesus. Still, this vague description does not match with the Jewish concept of resurrection.
You're going to have to give me a date for the earliest inscription, because Dionysus, I don't know anybody who thinks Dionysus is pre-Christian, not the resurrection portion.
Okay, well, all I can tell you is that the myth is that he is torn apart by the Titans, eaten, and he is raised from the dead.
But what is the date?
I don't know. I don't know the date of the, as I said, of the original. As far as any writings we have, but I know that with the myths, the Greek myths, most of our Greek myths, we do have from later collections. Except we know they are from. They were told earlier because we have the vase paintings depicting them going way back in time.
But the question is there a resurrection? And since we don't have any resurrection predating the 2nd century, all the way to the 4th century are the earliest ones, 2nd to 4th, we can say, well, maybe there's a resurrection there, but there's no data.
Even Tim Callahan, the skeptic you just saw defending Dionysus, admits there is no crucifixion. Even the skeptic Tim Callahan critiques the movie Zeitgeist, saying, perhaps the worst aspect of Part 1 of Peter Joseph's internet film Zeitgeist is that some of what it asserts is true. Unfortunately, this material is liberally and sloppily mixed with material that is only partially true, and much that is plainly and simply bogus. The evidence for Jesus as a real historical personage, though meager, is solid. Mithra is the only one of these pagan gods mentioned that could have conceivably come in contact with Christianity. As the late Dr. Ronald Nash puts it, Mithra was supposedly born when he emerged from a rock. Unless this rock was a virgin, there is no virgin birth for Mithra. For the last time, December 25th is irrelevant to origins. The claim of Mithra having 12 disciples comes from Zeitgeist sources, Acharya S., Timothy Freak, and Peter Gandy, yet there is no documentation for this claim in their books. Acharya S., Timothy Freak, and Peter Gandy now acknowledge that they got this idea of 12 disciples from a scene where Mithra is framed by 2 vertical rows of 6 pictures of what seems to be human figures and Mithra in the middle. The reliefs come from the 2nd century AD. Even if these reliefs were dated prior to Christianity, the Iranian Mithras had a single companion, and the Roman Mithra had 2 helpers, which were tiny torch-bearing likenesses of Mithra himself. Mithra also had a number of animal companions, a snake, a dog, a lion, a scorpion, but not 12 of them. Mithra did perform a number of actions rather typical for any deity worldwide, true or false, and in both his Iranian and Roman incarnations. It must be remembered, however, that some general similarities would normally apply to any religious leader. However, these are not objects that require some theory of dependence. Besides, the mysteries were not practiced until the 1st century AD, and Mithraism reached the height of its popularity around the 3rd and 4th centuries, when it was particularly popular among the soldiers of the Roman Empire. But that rules out the possibility of influence on Christianity. In his book, Image and Value in the Greco-Roman World, Richard Gordon writes that there is no death of Mithras, and thus there is no resurrection of Mithra, nor is there a 3-day burial. Zeitgeist sources, Freak and Gandy, claim that the Mithraic initiates enacted a similar resurrection scene, but their only reference is post-Christian, Tertullian's Prescription Against Heretics, chapter 40, which is also quoted in the Zeitgeist Addendum. In context, this in no way proves Zeitgeist's point, because Tertullian was explaining how Mithraic practices, which were introduced into Roman culture after Christianity, copied Christianity. Mithraic practices were not even in existence in the 1st century when Christianity began, but they were beginning to emerge in Tertullian's time and apparently copying Christian and Jewish beliefs. The complete passage reads, "The devil, of course, to whom pertain these wiles which pervert the truth, and who by the mystic rites of his idols vies even with the essential portions of the sacraments of God, he too baptizes some. That is, his own believers and faithful followers he promises the putting away of sins by a layer of his own. And, if my memory still serves me, Mithra there, in the kingdom of Satan, sets his mark on the foreheads of his soldiers, celebrates also the oblation of bread, and introduces an image of a resurrection. Therefore, in the very source cited by Zeitgeist and Freak and Gandy, Mithra celebrates and introduces an image of a resurrection, which can hardly be seen as a resurrection of Mithra, or for Mithraic initiates. Additionally, Tertullian's writing is significantly after the New Testament times. Dr. Ronald Nash affirms, "No claim can be made that Mithras was a dying and rising god. The tide of scholarly opinion has turned dramatically against attempts to make early Christianity dependent on the so-called dying and rising gods of Hellenistic paganism. Any unbiased examination of the evidence shows that such claims must be rejected. Sunday worship only appears in Roman Mithraism, and Acharya S. is apparently assuming that what held true for Roman Mithraism also held true for the Iranian Mithraism, but there is no evidence for this idea. It is therefore unlikely that borrowing occurred, but if there was borrowing, it was the other way around. Though the Bible teaches that Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday, and early Christians considered this the Lord's Day, they not only worshipped him on this day of the week, but every other day as well, as we read in Acts chapter 2, 46 and 47. And the Jews, such as Jesus, worshipped on the Sabbath, or Saturday. In the early 4th century, it was Constantine of the Roman Catholic Church who paganized the meaning of Sunday. His Sunday law of March 7th, AD 321 read, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in the cities rest, and let all workshops be closed." Mithraism could not have influenced the Gospel writers because it was not even known to the Roman world at the time of early Christianity. The Encyclopedia Britannica states, There is little notice of the Persian god Mithra in the Roman world until the beginning of the 2nd century, but from the year AD 136 onward, there are hundreds of dedicatory inscriptions to Mithra. Roman Mithraism was practically a new creation, wrought by a religious genius who may have lived as late as AD 100. We must assume that the pagan gods which Zeitgeist gives examples for are the ones for which they have the best documentation and evidence. As the viewer has seen, the examples given by Zeitgeist are not impressive. Taken together with all the debunked information, the parallels Zeitgeist presented in no way explains causation for Christianity. Before AD 100, all of the mystery religions were still mostly confined to localities. But after AD 100, they gradually began to attain popularity throughout the Roman Empire. Many writers used the late source material produced in this period after AD 150 to form reconstructions of what they think the cults must have been earlier to their spread in the Roman Empire. All of these sources and authors cited for these claims in the film Zeitgeist are not original primary sources, nor do they cite such primary or original material in their bibliographies. Even the majority of atheists and non-Christian scholars have rejected the idea that Christianity has been borrowed from ancient myths, including the well-respected Sir Edward Evans Pritchard, who wrote, "The evidence for this theory is negligible."
If you're a new Christian, or somebody that's just interested in learning more about Christianity, I want to send you a free copy of something that I've been calling the Christianity 101 DVDs, which you can get free at our website, BibleQuestions.tv. Basically, it's a data DVD. What that means is that it works like a flash drive. You pop it into your computer, you open it up, and you see all these files. I've put MP3s, movies, ebooks, audiobooks, just all kinds of stuff. In fact, 4 gigs of material that I think will really help you grow. It's totally free. There's literally no obligation. I do this because Jesus said in the Great Commission to make disciples of all men. So you can go to our website, BibleQuestions.tv, click on the Christianity 101 banner, and tell me where to send it. And it doesn't matter what country you live in, I'll ship it to you for free wherever you are. So there's 2 ways to order one. You can first go to the website, BibleQuestions.tv, and click the banner, or you can physically write me at Chris White Ministries, P.O. Box 110984, Nashville, Tennessee 37211. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching Bible Questions TV. If you want to see more about the video we were just watching, you can go to our website, BibleQuestions.tv. While you're there, you can order a free copy of the Christianity 101 DVD, or you can write to us at the address on your screen. Thanks to Chris White, Adam Larson, and NECAT Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Samuel H. Bolton, and we'll see you next time.